Before you watch this, my name is Alex Morrison. I'm 26 years old. I run an urban exploration channel with about 40,000 subscribers. Nothing huge, but I make decent money doing what I love, finding abandoned places and documenting them before they're gone forever. 3 weeks ago, I explored a location I'd been researching for over a year. A place my grandfather told me about when I was a kid. A place he made me promise I would never, ever visit. I broke that promise. What I found there changed everything I thought I knew about reality, about my family, about what's waiting in the places we've abandoned. I'm posting this account because I need people to know what happened. My footage was corrupted. My camera equipment was destroyed. All I have left are my memories and the notes I took immediately after I got out. If you know where this place is, please don't go there. I know that's what everyone says, and it just makes people more curious. I get it. I was the same way. But I'm begging you, learn from my mistake. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and some places were never meant to be found. It started with a story my grandfather told me when I was 8 years old. We were at a family reunion, sitting on his porch late at night while the adults drank inside. He was in his 70s then, a retired coal miner who'd spent 40 years underground in West Virginia. He didn't talk much about his past, but that night he'd had a few beers and he was in a storytelling mood. He told me about a town called Millbrook, a company town built in the 1920s to house miners and their families. At its peak, it had about 800 people, a main street with shops, a church, a school, company housing arranged in neat rows up the hillside. And then, in 1959, everyone left, not gradually. Not over years, as the coal ran out and jobs disappeared. All at once. In the span of 3 days, the entire population evacuated. Left their homes with furniture still inside. Left their cars and driveways. Left everything behind. The official story was a massive coal seam fire. Underground fire burning through the tunnels, making the ground unstable, releasing toxic gases. The company paid to relocate everyone and sealed up the mine entrances. End of story. But my grandfather told me the real reason people left. He said the miners had dug too deep, had broken through into something that wasn't a natural cave system, something older. And once they broke through, things started coming up from below. I remember him looking at me with complete seriousness, his weathered face lit by the yellow porch light. He said, "Alex, if you ever hear about Millbrook, if you ever think about going there, don't. I don't care how old you are or what you think you know. That place is wrong in ways I don't have words for. Promise me." I promised. I was 8. I believed him completely. But 18 years later, I'd become someone who didn't believe in supernatural explanations. I'd explored dozens of abandoned places. Old hospitals, shuttered prisons, forgotten factories. I'd never seen anything that couldn't be explained by decay, wildlife, or my own imagination running wild in the dark. And I'd gotten good at finding places that weren't supposed to be found. So when I came across a reference to Millbrook in an old mining industry report, I started researching. I found property records, old newspaper articles about the evacuation, satellite imagery showing a clearing in the West Virginia mountains where structures used to be. And I found something else. Forum posts from other urban explorers who tried to find Millbrook. Most said they couldn't locate it. The ones who claimed they found it never posted their footage, never updated their threads, just went silent. That should have been a red flag. Instead, it made me more determined. I spent 6 months planning. I studied topographic maps. I compared historical surveys to current satellite data. I even tracked down a woman who'd lived in Millbrook as a child before the evacuation. She was in her 70s now, living in a nursing home in Charleston. She wouldn't talk to me about the town. Not really. But when I was leaving, she grabbed my arm with surprising strength and said, "If you go there, don't go underground. Whatever you do, stay above ground. They come up from below." I thanked her and left. I should have listened to her. I should have listened to my grandfather. But I didn't. I set out on a Tuesday morning in late February. I told my girlfriend Emma I was going to explore an abandoned hospital in Virginia and would be back by Thursday. I told my best friend Jake I was checking out some old mining structures in Kentucky. I didn't tell anyone where I was really going. I knew that was stupid. Rule 1 of urban exploration: always tell someone your real location. But I also knew that if I told anyone I was going to Millbrook, they'd try to talk me out of it. And I'd come too far to turn back. The drive took 7 hours. The last 2 hours were on progressively smaller roads until I was on a dirt logging road that didn't appear on any GPS. I parked my truck where the road ended and loaded on my gear. Camera, equipment, lights, respirator in case of bad air, rope and climbing gear, first aid kit, satellite communicator that would ping my location to emergency services if I pressed the SOS button, two-way radio even though there was no one to call, and my grandfather's old mining helmet, the one he'd given me before he died 3 years ago. I didn't expect to need most of it, but I was prepared. The hike in was about 3 miles. The forest was dense, old growth that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. It was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my boots on dead leaves and my own breathing. About 2 miles in, I started seeing markers. Not official markers. Hand-painted signs on trees. Crude symbols that might have been warnings or directions or something else entirely. Some looked old, the paint faded and peeling. Others looked newer, like they'd been painted within the last few years. One of them said, "Turn back." Another said, "They are still here." I documented everything with my camera. This was good content. Creepy environmental storytelling. My subscribers would eat it up. I kept walking. The forest opened up suddenly, and I found myself at the edge of Millbrook. My breath caught. It was more intact than I'd expected. The buildings were still standing, though sagging and overgrown. The main street was visible, cracked pavement barely showing through decades of vegetation. I could see the church steeple rising above the trees. Row houses climbing the hillside, their windows dark and empty. It looked frozen in time. It looked like everyone had just vanished midday and never came back. I pulled out my camera and started filming. I recorded a standard intro. Name, date, location, what I was planning to document. I kept my voice steady and professional even though my hands were shaking slightly. I was excited. This was the find of a lifetime. Footage that would make my channel explode. I should have been afraid. I entered Millbrook on what used to be Main Street. The road was barely recognizable now, broken up by tree roots and covered in moss. Buildings lined both sides. A general store, a post office, something that might have been a diner. All the windows were broken. All the doors hung open. The town was silent. Not peaceful quiet. Not even the quiet of abandonment. This was the silence of held breath. Of something waiting. I ignored the feeling and kept filming. The general store was first. The shelves were still there, though collapsed in places. A few ancient cans of food still sat on the shelves, their labels faded to illegibility. The cash register was open and empty. Behind the counter, a calendar from 1959 hung on the wall, still showing May. May 1959. The month everyone left. I documented everything. The layout, the decay, the way nature was slowly reclaiming the space. I recorded myself walking through the aisles, my footsteps echoing weirdly in the enclosed space. And then I noticed something odd. There were no animal signs. No bird droppings. No evidence of rodents or raccoons or any of the creatures that usually colonize abandoned buildings. The dust on the floor was pristine except for my own footprints. Nothing living had been in this building for a very long time. I found a newspaper on the counter. The Millbrook Daily Gazette. May 3rd, 1959. The headline read, "Company announces emergency evacuation. All residents to be relocated within 72 hours. But someone had written on it in pen. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. It said, "They're lying. We're not leaving. We're going down. We have to go down. They're calling us. Can't you hear them calling?" I photographed the newspaper and moved deeper into the store. In the back room, I found evidence that someone had been living there recently. A sleeping bag that couldn't have been more than a few years old. Empty water bottles. Granola bar wrappers. And a journal. I picked it up with trembling hands. The journal belonged to someone named Marcus Chin. The first entry was dated August 2017. He was an urban explorer, like me. He'd found Millbrook after months of research. He was documenting it for his YouTube channel. The early entries were excited, professional. Descriptions of buildings, architectural details, historical context. Standard urban exploration content. But around the fourth day, the entries changed. I keep hearing knocking from underground. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. It's coming from multiple locations. Under the general store. Under the church. Under the row houses. Like something is trying to communicate. Fifth day. I should leave, but I can't. Every time I try to hike back to my car, I end up walking in circles. I've tried 6 times. I always end up back on Main Street. It's like the town won't let me go. Seventh day. I've started hearing singing at night. Old hymns. I recognize some of them from my grandmother's church. But the words are wrong. The melodies are wrong. It's beautiful and terrible, and I can't stop listening. 10th day. I saw someone today. An old woman standing in the window of one of the row houses. She was wearing a dress from the 1950s. She was watching me. When I waved, she turned and walked away from the window. I went into the house to find her. She was gone. But the house smelled like someone was cooking dinner. I could hear a radio playing upstairs. But when I went up, there was nothing. Just empty rooms and silence. The entries became more erratic after that. The handwriting deteriorated. Whole pages were filled with the same phrase written over and over. I have to go down. I have to go down. I have to go down. The final entry was dated August 28, 2017. I understand now. The town wasn't evacuated. The people didn't leave. They went down. All of them. Into the deep places under the mountain. And they're still there. They've been there this whole time. Waiting. And now they want me to join them. I'm going down tonight. I'm taking my camera. I need to document what's down there. I need to understand what they're waiting for. If you find this journal, don't follow me. Don't go down. Stay above ground. The calling is too strong. Once you hear it, you can't resist it. But you're reading this, which means you're already here. Which means you're already hearing it. I'm sorry. See you in the deep places. The journal ended there. I stood in that back room for a long time, Marcus Chen's journal in my hands, trying to process what I'd read. I pulled out my phone to check if there was any signal. Maybe I could search for Marcus Chen. Maybe I could find out what happened to him. No signal. Of course not. I pocketed the journal. Evidence. Proof that I wasn't the first to find this place. Proof that other people had experienced the same things. Proof that none of them ever left. I should have turned back then. Should have tried to hike out while I still could. But I needed more footage. More documentation. I needed to understand what happened here. I needed to see the church. Before heading to the church, I decided to explore some of the row houses on the hillside. They were residential structures, built in neat rows for the mining families. Most were identical, small 2-story homes with front porches and backyards that led up to the forest. I chose one at random and climbed the front steps. The porch groaned under my weight, but held. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. The furniture was still there. Couch, coffee table, photographs on the walls. A television from the 1950s sat in the corner. The kitchen still had dishes in the sink. Food had long since rotted away, but you could see the remnants of a meal that was never finished. Upstairs, I found 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom had a bed neatly made. The closet still held clothes on hangers. On the nightstand sat a book, face down, like someone had been reading it and simply put it down intending to come back. The children's rooms were the worst. Toys on the floor. Drawings pinned to the walls. A child's bed with stuffed animals arranged carefully on the pillow. Everything frozen in time, waiting for children who would never return. I was filming the children's room when I heard it. Footsteps. Downstairs. Slow and deliberate. Walking through the house. I froze. My camera was still recording. I could hear my own breathing, rapid and shallow, on the audio. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Paused. And then began climbing. I looked around for an escape. There was a window, but it was a 15-foot drop to the ground. The only way out was the door, which meant walking past whatever was coming up those stairs. The footsteps reached the top. I could hear them in the hallway now, moving toward the children's room.
Toward me.
I pressed myself against the wall next to the door, camera still rolling, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Silence. I waited for what felt like an eternity. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera. And then I heard something that made my blood run cold.
Humming.
A woman's voice, humming a lullaby. The kind of song a mother sings to her children at bedtime. Sweet and gentle and completely wrong in this abandoned house. The door began to open.
Slowly.
Inch by inch. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except watch as the door swung open to reveal nothing. The hallway was empty, but I could still hear the humming.
It was coming from the other bedroom now.
The master bedroom. I walked out into the hallway on legs that barely supported me. My camera was pointed at the master bedroom door. I could see it on my viewfinder screen, slightly ajar. I approached slowly, pushed the door open. The room was empty, but the bed that had been neatly made when I looked before was now rumpled, like someone had just gotten up from it. And on the pillow was a small indentation, like a head had been resting there moments ago. The humming stopped. I ran. I burst out of that house and into the street, gasping for air, my whole body shaking. I stood there in the middle of Main Street, hands on my knees, trying to calm down. And that's when I noticed them. In the windows of every row house. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Faces. Watching me. They weren't threatening. They weren't even particularly frightening in appearance. They were just people. Men, women, children. All dressed in clothes from the 1950s. All standing perfectly still. All watching. I raised my camera and zoomed in on the nearest window. Through my viewfinder, I could see her clearly. An old woman with gray hair. She was smiling at me. A gentle, grandmotherly smile. And then she raised her hand and waved. I lowered the camera. When I looked up again, all the windows were empty. I stood there in the silence, surrounded by abandoned houses that weren't as abandoned as they should be, and made a decision. I had to see the church. I had to go underground. I had to know what Marcus Chin found. I had to understand what they were all waiting for. It was the best preserved structure in town. White paint peeling but the walls straight, the steeple intact. The front doors were closed but not locked. They opened with a long, drawn-out creak that echoed across the empty town. The interior was dim. Afternoon light filtered through broken stained glass windows, throwing colored patterns on the dusty pews. The altar was still set up. Hymnals still sat in the pew racks, their pages yellowed and brittle. And on every pew, someone had carved words. Not recently. The carvings were old, weathered, but still legible. I walked down the center aisle reading them. It's underneath us. The knocking never stops. They made us build on top of them. God doesn't hear us down here. The company knew. They always knew. I filmed every single one. My heart was pounding now. This was incredible content, but it was also deeply unsettling. These weren't the usual graffiti you find in abandoned places. These felt like messages, warnings carved by desperate people. I reached the front of the church and turned to film the whole space. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Fresh flowers on the altar. Not old, dried flowers that had been there for decades. Fresh flowers. Wild flowers that looked like they'd been picked recently. Maybe within the last week. Someone had been here. Someone was maintaining this church. I stood there for a long moment, camera still rolling, deciding what to do. I could leave now. I had good footage. Enough for a solid video. I could hike back to my truck and get out before dark. But I didn't. Because behind the altar, I could see a door. And above the door, in faded letters, basement. The church stood at the far end of Main Street, its white steeple rising above everything else in town. It was the best preserved structure I'd seen. White paint peeling but the walls straight, the steeple intact. The front doors were closed but not locked. They opened with a long, drawn-out creak that echoed across the empty town. The interior was dim. Afternoon light filtered through broken stained glass windows, throwing colored patterns on the dusty pews. The altar was still set up. Hymnals still sat in the pew racks, their pages yellowed and brittle. And on every pew, someone had carved words. Not recently. The carvings were old, weathered, but still legible. I walked down the center aisle reading them, my camera documenting each one. It's underneath us. The knocking never stops. They made us build on top of them. God doesn't hear us down here. The company knew. They always knew. We should never have dug so deep. It's not cold down there. They sing at night. Beautiful and terrible. My children hear them in their sleep. The pastor says we must resist. But how do you resist what's already inside you? I filmed every single carving. This was incredible content. But it was also deeply unsettling. These weren't the usual graffiti you find in abandoned places. These felt like messages. Warnings carved by desperate people. I reached the front of the church and turned to film the whole space. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Fresh flowers on the altar. Not old, dried flowers that had been there for decades. Fresh flowers. Wildflowers that looked like they'd been picked recently. Maybe within the last week. Someone had been here. Someone was maintaining this church. I approached the altar slowly, my camera pointed ahead. The flowers were arranged in a simple vase. Daisies, black-eyed Susans, wild roses. Common wildflowers from the surrounding forest. And next to the vase was a Bible. Old, leather-bound, opened to a specific page. I leaned in to read it. Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Someone had underlined a single verse. If you, O Lord, kept a record of sins, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, so that we can, with reverence, serve you. And in the margin, written in fresh ink, was a note. They don't forgive. They only wait. My hands were shaking as I filmed this. Fresh ink. Fresh flowers. Someone had been here within the last few days. I looked around the church more carefully. On the wall behind the altar, I noticed something I'd missed before. A large mural, painted directly onto the plaster. It depicted the town of Millbrook, but not as it appeared above ground. The mural showed the town from underneath. The buildings were inverted, hanging down like stalactites. And below them was a vast cavern, so large the bottom wasn't visible. And in that cavern were thousands of small figures, all holding lights, all standing in formation, all looking up at the inverted town above them. It was beautiful and disturbing and impossible. Someone had painted this. Someone with skill. Someone who had seen what was underground. I was studying the mural when I heard it. Singing. Faint at first, then growing louder. Coming from somewhere behind the altar. Multiple voices in harmony. Old hymns. The kind my grandfather's generation sang in churches. But the harmonies were wrong. Off-key in ways that made my teeth ache. Words that sounded like English, but weren't quite right. I followed the sound to a door behind the altar. Above it, in faded letters, basement. The singing was coming from down there. I stood with my hand on the door handle for a long moment, every instinct screaming at me not to open it. The woman in the nursing home had said stay above ground. My grandfather had said the miners broke through into something below. But I was here. I'd come this far. And I needed to know. The door opened easily. Beyond it, stairs descended into darkness. Cool air flowed up, carrying that mineral smell I'd noticed before. Ancient, like opening a cave that had been sealed for centuries. And carrying the smell of something else. Candle wax. Recently burned. I turned on my headlamp and started down. The stairs were wood, old but solid. They descended maybe 20 feet before opening into a basement that shouldn't have existed. It was huge. Far too large to fit under the church above. The ceiling was low, maybe 6 feet, made of raw rock that looked like it had been carved directly into the mountain. And it wasn't empty. Along the walls, someone had arranged objects. Hundreds of them. Thousands. I moved closer with my camera, my breath fogging in the cold air. They were mining tools. Pickaxes, shovels, hammers, drills. But they'd been bent and twisted into shapes that shouldn't be possible. Metal folded like paper. Wooden handles tied into knots. All of them arranged in precise geometric patterns on the stone floor. And everywhere, carved into every surface, were symbols. The same symbols I'd seen painted on the trees. The same symbols that were carved into the church pews. But down here they were older.
Deeper.
Cut into solid rock with what must have been tremendous effort. I filmed everything, narrating quietly into my camera microphone. Professional.
Detached.
Trying to maintain some sense of control over a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond my comprehension. The singing had stopped when I entered the basement, but I could still feel it. A vibration in the air, a pressure against my eardrums. I walked deeper into the space. The geometric patterns on the floor seemed to lead somewhere. I followed them, stepping carefully over the twisted tools, my headlamp cutting through the darkness. The basement extended much further than it should have. I walked for what felt like several minutes, the space opening up ahead of me, the ceiling getting lower, the walls pressing closer. And then I found the candles.
Dozens of them.
Maybe 100. Arranged in a perfect circle on the floor. Some had burned down completely. Others looked recently lit, the wax still soft. In the center of the circle was something that made me stop breathing. A mining helmet, just like my grandfather's. Just like the one I was carrying in my pack. I approached slowly. The helmet was old, battered, covered in coal dust. But on the back, written in faded paint, was a name. Morrison. My family name. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the camera. This wasn't possible. My grandfather had his helmet. I had it in my pack right now. This had to be a different Morrison. Had to be. But when I picked it up, I saw something that made the world tilt sideways. Inside the helmet, written in marker on the liner, was a date. May 1959. And below it, in my grandfather's handwriting, words I recognized from his diary. I tried to seal it better. I'm sorry. My grandfather had been here. In this basement. In 1959. He'd left his helmet here. Left it in a circle of candles like some kind of offering or ward or prayer. He'd tried to seal something. And he'd failed. I was still holding the helmet when I heard the knocking. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Coming from deeper in the basement. Coming from behind a wall that had a doorway carved into it. Coming from below. I should have run. Should have grabbed the helmet and gotten out of there. But I couldn't move.
Couldn't think.
Couldn't do anything except stare at that doorway and listen to the knocking. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. My feet started moving before my brain gave them permission. I walked toward the doorway. Toward the sound. Toward whatever was waiting in the deep places below. The doorway led to a tunnel. Not man-made. Natural cave formation, descending at a gentle angle deeper into the mountain. The walls were smooth, worn by water or time or something else. The air was colder here, thicker. It felt like breathing syrup. I took one step into the tunnel. The temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly. My breath misted. The smell of minerals grew stronger, mixed now with something organic. Something that might have been rot, or might have been something else. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Total. Like being in a sensory deprivation chamber. My ears felt pressurized. My own breathing sounded impossibly loud. And then I heard something that changed everything. My grandfather's voice. Faint. Distant. But unmistakably his. The voice I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. The voice that told me stories on his porch. The voice that made me promise never to come here. He was saying my name. Alex. Alex, come down. We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting so long. I took 3 more steps into the tunnel. My rational mind was screaming that this was impossible. My grandfather had been dead for 3 years. This was a hallucination. Audio pareidolia. My brain creating patterns in random sounds. But it sounded so real. Alex, please. It's not far. Just a little deeper. We're all here. Your family. Everyone who came before. We're waiting for you in the deep places. I took 5 more steps. The tunnel was getting narrower. The walls were pressing in. My headlamp showed the path descending ahead, curving out of sight. You were always meant to come here, always meant to join us. It's in your blood, in your bones. You can feel it, can't you? The calling, the need to go down, to understand, to see what we've been protecting all these years. I stopped walking.
Protecting.
That's what he'd said in his diary, that they'd tried to seal it, that they'd tried to keep something contained. This wasn't my grandfather calling me. This was something using his voice, something that had been listening to miners for decades, learning how to mimic them, learning how to call their families down into the dark. I took 3 steps backward.
The voice changed.
Got lower, angrier. Multiple voices now, overlapping, speaking in unison. You came all this way. Don't turn back now. Don't you want to understand? Don't you want to see what's waiting? Don't you want to know what your grandfather died protecting you from? I took 3 more steps back. We've been patient. So patient. Waiting for generations.
Calling your bloodline. Calling you.
You're the last Morrison. The last one who can open the way. The last one who can break the seal your grandfather made. I turned and ran. Behind me, the voices rose to a cacophony. Dozens of voices.
Hundreds.
All calling my name. All begging me to come back. All promising to show me wonders and terrors and truths that would shatter my understanding of reality. I ran through the basement, past the circle of candles, past the twisted mining tools, past the carved symbols. I hit the stairs and took them 3 at a time. I burst out of the church into the late afternoon light.
And saw them.
All along Main Street. Standing in doorways. Looking out of windows. Emerging from the side streets and the row houses on the hillside.
People.
The same people I'd seen in the windows before. But now they were outside. Standing in the street. Standing on porches. Standing in yards.
Hundreds of them.
All dressed in clothes from the 1950s. All covered in varying degrees of coal dust. All standing perfectly still. All watching me. And I recognized faces. Faces from photographs I'd seen during my research. Faces from old newspaper articles about Millbrook. Faces of people who were supposed to have been relocated 65 years ago.
People who should have been dead.
And in the front, standing in the middle of Main Street, was the old man from the basement. The one who'd said I shouldn't have come back. He was smiling now. That same black-toothed smile. And he raised his hand and pointed at me. You broke the seal, he said. His voice carried across the silent town. Just by being here. Just by being a Morrison. Just by going down into the deep places. The seal your grandfather made required Morrison blood to maintain it. And now that blood is here, walking above ground, when it should be down below holding the line. I didn't understand what he meant. I just knew I had to leave. I started running toward the forest, toward the trail that led back to my truck. You can't leave, the old man called after me. Not anymore. You've heard the calling. You've been down into the tunnels.
You're one of us now.
You'll try to leave, but you'll always come back. Maybe not today. Maybe not this week. But eventually. The calling gets stronger the more you resist it. I didn't stop running. I crashed into the tree line and kept going. The town disappeared behind me, but I could still hear them. All of those people. All of those voices.
Singing.
Those old hymns. Those wrong harmonies. Those words that weren't quite English. The singing followed me through the forest. Followed me all the way back to my truck. I don't remember much about getting out of that basement. I remember shoving past the old man, who didn't try to stop me. I remember taking the stairs 3 at a time. I remember bursting out of the church into the late afternoon light. And I remember seeing them. All along Main Street. Standing in doorways. Looking out of windows. Emerging from the side streets and the row houses on the hillside.
People. Dozens of them.
Maybe 100. All dressed in clothes from the 1950s. All covered in varying degrees of coal dust. All standing perfectly still. All watching me. I recognized faces from photographs I'd seen during my research. People who'd lived in Millbrook. People who were supposed to have been relocated 65 years ago. People who should have been dead. They didn't move.
Didn't speak.
just watched as I stood frozen in the middle of the street. And then, from somewhere below the town, I heard it again. The knocking. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. But this time it was everywhere. Under every building. Under the street itself. Like the entire mountain was knocking from the inside. The people began to move.
Not toward me.
Toward their homes. Into buildings. Down side streets. Disappearing back into the town. Within seconds, the streets were empty again. Like they'd never been there at all. But I could still hear them. Inside the buildings. Moving around. Going about their lives as if they still lived here. As if the last 65 years had never happened.
I ran.
I ran down Main Street toward the forest.
My gear bounced on my back.
My camera slammed against my chest. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. I crashed into the tree line and kept running. Branches whipped at my face. My lungs burned. Behind me, I could hear the knocking getting louder.
Faster.
More insistent. And I could hear singing again.
The whole town singing.
Those wrong harmonies. Those words that weren't quite English. I ran for what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes. I didn't stop until I reached my truck. I threw my gear in the back, started the engine, and drove. I didn't slow down until I was back on paved roads. Didn't feel safe until I was on the interstate surrounded by normal traffic, normal people, normal reality. It was dark by then. I'd been in Millbrook for maybe 3 hours total, but it felt like days. I drove straight home. I didn't stop except for gas. I got back to my apartment at 4 in the morning and immediately tried to review my footage. The camera wouldn't turn on. I tried everything. New batteries. Different power sources. Nothing. The camera was completely dead. When I finally got it to a repair shop, they told me the internal memory had been magnetically wiped. Every single file.
Gone.
The only evidence I have that any of it happened is this account. And the dirt under my fingernails that still smells like that basement. And the nightmares. Because I dream about it now. Every night. I dream I'm back in Millbrook walking down Main Street. The people are there, watching from windows. The knocking echoes up from below. And somewhere in the distance, I can hear singing. And in the dreams, I always end up in that church basement. Standing at the entrance to the tunnel. Knowing I shouldn't go down, but unable to stop myself. I walk down into the darkness. Down and down. The tunnel gets narrower. The air gets thicker. The singing gets louder. And eventually, I reach a place where the tunnel opens up into a vast cavern. A cavern so large, I cannot see the walls. Cannot see the ceiling. Cannot see anything except the lights. Hundreds of mining lamps.
Thousands of them.
Arranged in patterns on the cave floor. And holding each lamp is a person. Standing perfectly still. Perfectly silent. Waiting. And I realize they're all the people from Millbrook. Everyone who supposedly evacuated in 1959. They're all down here. They've always been down here. And they're waiting for something to come up from even deeper below. That's when I wake up. I haven't told anyone about this. Not Emma. Not Jake. Not my subscribers. I've been radio silent on my channel for 3 weeks. People are asking where I've been. What I'm working on. I don't know how to answer them. Because I've been researching. Digging deeper into Millbrook's history, trying to understand what I saw, trying to understand what my grandfather was involved in. And I found things that make it so much worse. I found mining company records from 1958 through a contact who works in the West Virginia State Archives. They were sealed, classified, marked as permanent retention, restricted access. It took me 2 weeks and $500 to get copies. The records paint a very different picture than the official story. In March 1958, the Millbrook Mining Company's deep shaft crew broke through into what they initially thought was a natural cave system. The foreman's report describes it as a cavern of unprecedented size, extending beyond the range of our equipment to measure. They were excited. A cavern that large could mean new coal seams, new minerals, extended operation of the mine for decades. They sent a team down to explore. The team came back after 6 hours. The report says they descended over 2,000 feet and still hadn't found the bottom. But they did find something else. Structures. Not natural formations. Not modern construction. Something else. The report struggles to describe them. Stone formations that appear architectural in nature, but following no known building practices. Walls that curve in ways that suggest they continue in dimensions we cannot perceive. Passageways that seem to loop back on themselves while simultaneously extending forward. And they found evidence of previous mining operations. Very previous. The report mentions primitive tools, possibly pre-industrial, scattered throughout the cavern system. Age unknown, but significantly weathered. Someone had been down there before. Long before. The May 1958 report is where things get disturbing. The crew started hearing sounds. Knocking patterns that seemed to respond to their own drilling and excavation. They would knock 3 times, testing the stability of a wall, and something would knock back. 3 times. From deeper in the cavern system. At first they thought it was echoes. Then they thought it was other mining operations, though there were no other mines in the area. Then they stopped trying to explain it and just started documenting it. The patterns became more complex, more deliberate. The foreman wrote, "It's as if something down there is learning our patterns. Learning to communicate. Or perhaps it's been trying to communicate all along, and we're only now learning to listen." In June 1958, they pulled the crew out of the deep shaft. The official reason was unstable geological conditions. The real reason, according to the internal memos, was that 3 crew members had refused to return underground. They said something was down there. Something aware. Something that wanted them to keep digging deeper. The company sealed that section of the mine. Posted guards. Issued strict orders that no one was to enter the deep shaft without executive authorization. But the sounds continued. The knocking could be heard throughout the mine. Workers reported hearing it in the tunnels. In the equipment sheds. In the bathhouse. Some said they could hear it at home, late at night, coming from under their floors. The October 1958 memo is chilling. "We have lost control of the narrative. Workers are refusing shifts. Families are reporting disturbances in their homes. The local pastor has performed 17 blessings on residences in the past month alone. We are losing the workforce to superstition and fear. Recommendation: immediate shutdown of all deep shaft operations. Consider full evacuation and relocation of the town. The alternative is a complete work stoppage and potential legal liability if, when casualties occur." Casualties. They were expecting casualties. In November 1958, a miner named Robert Morrison, my great-uncle, my grandfather's younger brother, disappeared during a shift. He was last seen entering the sealed deep shaft section. When they found him 3 days later, he was sitting in the dark 2,000 feet down, holding his mining helmet, singing. The report says he was unresponsive to commands, exhibiting signs of severe psychological distress, repeatedly stating he needed to wait with the others. They brought him up, hospitalized him. He died 2 weeks later. Cause of death listed as sudden cardiac failure, but the medical notes mention patient exhibited extreme agitation when prevented from returning underground, made multiple escape attempts, became violent when restrained. My grandfather's brother died trying to get back underground. After that, the evacuations were planned. It took from November 1958 to May 1959 to arrange. The company paid for relocation, provided jobs in other towns, promised to maintain pension benefits, did everything they could to make it attractive to leave. Most people took the offer. Some didn't. I found newspaper articles from surrounding towns. Missing persons reports from June 1959 through December 1960. At least 30 people went missing in that 18-month period. All of them had connections to Millbrook. Family members of relocated workers. People who went to check on abandoned property. Journalists investigating the evacuation. Officials conducting environmental assessments. They all went missing in the same area, within a 5-mile radius of where Millbrook used to be. The last article I found was from January 1961. It's a short piece, barely 2 paragraphs, in a local paper. It says that due to continued incidents of trespassers and squatters in the abandoned mining town area, the state police had established a permanent barrier and would prosecute anyone attempting to enter the zone. After that, the articles stop. Like everyone collectively agreed to forget Millbrook existed. But I found one more thing. A letter to the editor, published in a Charleston paper in 1962. It's from someone who signs as a former Millbrook resident. The letter reads, "To those who would seek out the old mining town, I beg you to reconsider. What was found in the deep places should have remained undiscovered. What was awakened should have remained sleeping. Some of us stayed behind, not by choice, but by calling. We maintain the vigil. We hold the line. We wait in the deep places so that what waits below us does not rise to the surface. We gave up our lives for this. We gave up our families. We gave up everything to keep the seal intact. Do not break what we have sacrificed so much to maintain. If you hear knocking, do not answer. If you hear singing, do not listen. If you feel called to go underground, resist. We are here. We are watching. We are waiting. And we will be here long after you have forgotten we exist." The letter was never acknowledged, never followed up on. It just sits in the archives, one old newspaper clipping among thousands. But I found it, and now I understand what the old man meant when he said, "I broke the seal." I mentioned before that I found my grandfather's diary from 1959. What I didn't mention was that there were other diaries, dozens of them covering 50 years. My aunt gave them all to me after he died. I never had the heart to read them. Until now. The entries from 1959 tell a different story than the one he told my family. He didn't just work in the mine. He was part of a special crew. Volunteers who stayed behind after the evacuation. 12 men total. All of them connected to the deep shaft incident. All of them related to people who had been affected by what was found down there. Their job was to seal it, to use explosives and concrete and whatever else they could to collapse the tunnels and prevent anything from coming up. They worked in shifts, 24 hours down in the deep places, 72 hours above ground to recover. They did this for 6 months. The diary entries document the deterioration of the crew. First month, the work is hard but necessary. We can still hear them down there. The knocking has become constant. Sometimes it follows patterns. Sometimes it seems random, but it never stops. Second month, Jenkins didn't come up from his last shift. We found him 3 levels down, sitting in the dark, his helmet off, just listening. He said they were teaching him to understand. We brought him up, but he's not right. He keeps trying to go back down. Third month, we're down to 8 men. The others couldn't resist the calling. They're still down there. We can hear them sometimes, singing with the others. My brother is among them.
I try not to think about that.
Fourth month. The seal isn't holding. We pour concrete, and it cracks within days. We collapse tunnels, and new passages open. It's like the mountain itself is working against us. Or something in the mountain is working to get out. Fifth month. I'm the last one. The others all went down. Said they couldn't fight it anymore. Said it was easier to give in. To join the waiting. But I made a promise. To my wife. To my sons. To everyone who left. I would hold the line. The final entry is from November 1959. I can't hold it anymore. The calling is too strong. I hear my brother's voice every night. I hear them all. Singing. Calling my name. Promising me understanding and purpose, and an end to the loneliness of being the last watcher. But I found another way. A Morrison has to be here. A Morrison has to maintain the seal. But it doesn't have to be me. I'm leaving my helmet in the deep places. My blood. My name. A piece of me that will stay and watch when I cannot. It's not a perfect seal, but it might hold. Might buy time. I'm going home.
To my family.
To my life. I'll never speak of this place again. I'll make my children promise never to come here. But I know promises don't hold. I know eventually one of them will be called. One of them will come back.
I'm sorry.
To whoever reads this. To whoever comes after me. I tried to seal it better. I'm sorry. He left in November 1959. Moved to Ohio. Never went back. But he knew someone would.
He knew I would.
And when I went into that basement, when I stood in that circle of candles, when I picked up his helmet, I broke the seal. My presence there. A Morrison in the deep places for the first time in 60 years. undid whatever binding he'd created, whatever sacrifice he'd made. And now something that's been contained for 6 decades is free to rise. I'm writing this at 3 in the morning because I can't sleep anymore. The dreams are getting worse, more vivid, more detailed. Last night I dreamed I was in that cavern again, standing among all those people holding mining lamps. And I looked down and realized I was holding a lamp too, had been holding it the whole time, and I was covered in coal dust. And I was singing with everyone else. Those wrong harmonies, those words that aren't quite English. And I understood what they were singing. They were singing about waiting, about how long they'd been waiting, about what they're waiting for. Something is moving up from below, has been moving up for a very long time.
Slowly, patiently,
Working its way through the deep places of the earth, coming to the surface. The miners didn't find it. It found them. It's been finding people for thousands of years. In caves, in mines, in deep places, calling them down, keeping them down there, making them wait. And now it's using them to call others. I woke up standing in my kitchen with my car keys in my hand. I was dressed. I had my camera bag packed. I was about to leave. To go back to Millbrook. This has happened 3 times this week. Each time I've been closer to actually getting in my car. Last night, I made it to my truck before I realized what I was doing. The calling is getting stronger. I understand now why those urban explorers who found Millbrook never posted updates. Why they went silent. They went back. And I'm going to go back too. I can feel it. It's not a choice anymore. It's a compulsion. A need that grows stronger every day. I hear the knocking sometimes. During the day now. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. From under the floor. From behind walls. From beneath the ground wherever I am. And I hear singing. Faint but constant. Just at the edge of perception. Those old hymns. Those wrong harmonies. My grandfather tried to run. Moved to Ohio. Built a whole new life. But he never stopped dreaming about Millbrook. My aunt told me that. She said in his last years he would wake up confused, asking why he wasn't underground, asking why he'd left his post, saying he needed to get back to his lamp. She thought it was dementia, but it wasn't. He was being called back. He resisted for 50 years. But in the end, 3 days before he died, he disappeared for 36 hours. They found him at a rest stop 200 miles away, heading toward West Virginia. He couldn't explain where he was going. He just said he needed to go down, needed to wait with the others. They brought him home. He died 3 days later. And I'm going to follow him. Not today. Maybe not next week. But eventually. The calling doesn't stop. It just gets louder, more insistent, more impossible to resist. I'm posting this account so someone knows what happened. So there's a record. So if anyone else stumbles across Millbrook in their research, they'll know not to go. But they probably will go anyway. Because the calling is in the story now. In these words. In the act of reading about it and thinking about it and wondering what's really down there. If you've read this far, you're probably already feeling it. That curiosity. That need to know. That urge to find Millbrook and see for yourself. That's how it spreads. That's how it calls. I'm leaving in the morning. I've tried to fight it for 3 weeks, but I can't anymore. The knocking is constant now. The singing never stops. I can barely function. I can't eat.
Can't sleep.
I can't think about anything except going back. Emma found me in the garage last night standing next to my truck with my hand on the driver's side door. I'd been there for 2 hours. She's terrified. She wants me to see a doctor. She thinks I'm having a breakdown. Maybe I am. But I know what I need to do. I need to go back to Millbrook. I need to go down into that tunnel. I need to walk down into the deep places and join the others waiting there. I'm not scared anymore. That's the worst part. I should be terrified. But all I feel is relief. Like I'm finally doing what I was always meant to do. Like I'm going home. My grandfather felt this. All those people in 1959 felt this. Everyone who's found Millbrook since then has felt this. And now you'll feel it too. Because you've read this far.
Because you've thought about it.
Because somewhere in the back of your mind, you're already wondering where Millbrook is. Already thinking about how you might find it. Already planning your trip. The calling spreads through attention, through curiosity, through the simple act of knowing it exists. I'm sorry I've done this to you, but I'm also glad I won't be alone down there. We'll all be waiting together, in the deep places, in the dark, holding our lamps, singing our songs, waiting for what's coming up from below, waiting for it to finally reach the surface, waiting for it to spread into the world. We won't have to wait much longer. 3 knocks.
Pause.
3 knocks.
Can you hear it?
It's underneath you right now. It's always been underneath you. And soon it will be all around you. See you in the deep places. Alex. This account was posted to the r/no sleep subreddit on March 22nd, 2024 at 2:47 a.m. The user use /urban explorer_Alex has not been active since. His girlfriend reported him missing on March 23rd. His truck was found abandoned on a logging road in West Virginia on March 25th. His camera equipment was in the truck. His phone was on the dashboard, powered off, showing his last location as somewhere in the mountains with no roads. A search was conducted, but he has not been found. If anyone has information about Alex Morrison's whereabouts, please contact the West Virginia State Police. And if you're reading this and you feel the urge to search for Millbrook,
Don't. Please.
just don't.